In 1964, the FBI broke into Bumpy Johnson's apartment while his wife Mayme was at church. They unscrewed the light fixture above her bed. They drilled a hole through the plaster, and they installed a miniature microphone no bigger than a shirt button directly above the pillow where Bumpy Johnson slept every night. They recorded everything: private conversations, phone calls, Mayme praying before bed, Mayme crying in the dark when the weight of being married to the most wanted man in Harlem pressed too heavy on her chest. They recorded a woman's private grief and filed it in a cabinet at 26 Federal Plaza under the label Johnson. LLC, surveillance, ONGOing. But here's what the Federal Bureau of Investigation didn't know. Bumpy Johnson found that microphone 3 weeks after they planted it. And instead of ripping it out, instead of calling a lawyer, instead of staging another sit-in at a police station the way he'd done before, Bumpy Johnson sat in his bedroom and smiled because he realized something the FBI never considered. A listening device doesn't just let them hear you, it lets you talk to them. And if they believe everything they hear, then the man with the microphone above his bed controls the most powerful law enforcement agency in America. What happened next became one of the most embarrassing moments in the FBI's history in New York. Bumpy fed them a single lie, one carefully constructed conversation, spoken at just the right volume, at just the right time, with just enough detail to be irresistible, and that lie sent 14 federal agents crashing through the front door of New York State Senator Aldo Marchetti's townhouse on the Upper East Side at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, in front of his wife, his children, and 2 newspaper photographers who just happened to be parked across the street. The senator was eating pancakes. He was not running a narcotics operation. And the FBI had just raided the home of one of the most politically connected Italian Americans in New York, based on a bedtime conversation Bumpy Johnson had staged for their microphone. How do you turn your enemy's weapon into your own? That's what this story answers. And nobody tells it. Until now, you have to understand what it meant to be watched by the FBI in 1964. This wasn't a movie. There were no car chases, no dramatic confrontations. It was quieter than that, and more suffocating. The FBI's COINTELPRO program had been running since 1956, originally designed to disrupt the Communist Party, but by the early 1960s it had expanded into something far broader and far uglier. J. Edgar Hoover's bureau was surveilling civil rights leaders, black activists, labor organizers, and anyone connected to what the Bureau called subversive elements. Martin Luther King Jr. had microphones in his hotel rooms. Malcolm X had agents following him to the barbershop. And Bumpy Johnson, who was connected to both men and to the Italian mob, had become one of the most surveilled people in New York City. The Bureau's interest in Bumpy wasn't ideological. It was strategic. Robert Morgenthau, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, had made his career objective clear: dismantle the Italian crime families. Morgenthau's record was almost perfect. 97 convictions, 0 acquittals. He was brilliant, relentless, and he understood that the fastest route to the Italian mob ran through their Harlem partner. Bumpy Johnson was the bridge between black organized crime and the Genovese family. If Morgenthau could turn Bumpy into an informant, he could bring down half the commission. But Bumpy wouldn't turn. He'd spent 11 years in Alcatraz rather than cooperate. When Morgenthau's agents offered him immunity, protection, a clean slate, Bumpy had said 3 words that became legend in Harlem: "I'm not a snitch." So Morgenthau changed strategy. If Bumpy wouldn't talk willingly, the FBI would listen unwillingly. Wiretaps on his phones, agents tailing his car, informants in his organization, and finally, in March 1964, a covert entry into his apartment at 300 Edgecombe Avenue to plant a listening device. Edgecombe Avenue was sacred, Ed ground in Harlem. The building at 300 had housed some of the most prominent black Americans of the 20th century. It was where the Harlem elite lived: doctors, lawyers, musicians, intellectuals. Bumpy and Mayme had their apartment there since his return from Alcatraz in January 1963. It was the center of Bumpy's world, and the FBI wanted to hear everything that happened inside it. Like this video and tell me where you're watching from tonight, because we're just getting started. The entry happened on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Mayme Johnson attended a Bible study at her church every Wednesday from 2 to 4 p.m. She'd been going since 1949, never missed. The FBI knew this because they'd been watching her for months. They knew her schedule better than she did. 2 agents from the Bureau's Technical Services Division entered the apartment using a key obtained through means that were, technically, illegal. The Bureau didn't have a warrant for physical entry. COINTELPRO operations frequently bypassed warrant requirements under Hoover's standing directive that national security concerns superseded constitutional niceties. Break-ins to plant listening devices were so common they had an internal nickname, black bag jobs. The agents worked quickly. They identified the master bedroom, unscrewed the ceiling light fixture above the bed, drilled a pinhole through the plaster, install, DA miniature condenser microphone, state-of-the-art for 1964, roughly the size of a thumbnail, wired it through the ceiling cavity to a transmitter hidden above the bathroom, tiles in the apartment directly above, which the Bureau had rented under a false name. 2 months earlier, the transmitter broadcast on a frequency monitored 24 hours a day from a listening post at the FBI's New York field office at 26 Federal Plaza. 2 agents worked in rotating 12-hour shifts, headphones on, notepads ready, recording every sound that came through Mayme Johnson's bedroom ceiling. Bumpy's conversations with Illinois Gordon about operations, Bumpy's phone calls from the bedroom extension, Mayme's prayers, Mayme talking to her sister in North Carolina, Mayme arguing with Bumpy about his health, his diet, his refusal to slow down. The intimate architecture of a marriage recorded on reel-to-reel tape and filed as evidence. For 3 weeks, the FBI listened, and for 3 weeks they heard exactly what they expected, Bumpy discussing business. Names, locations, dollar amounts. Nothing explosive, but enough to build a picture. Enough to justify the operation's continuation. What they didn't hear was Bumpy Johnson discussing the small anomaly he'd noticed on his bedroom ceiling. Bumpy Johnson was not a man who missed details. He'd survived 40 years in the most dangerous business in America by noticing what other people overlooked. A car parked in the same spot 2 days in a row. A waiter who lingered too long near his table. A handshake that lasted 1 beat too long. He cataloged the world the way a chess player catalogs a board. Every piece in its position, every position evaluated for threat. On a Thursday evening in early April, 3 weeks after the device was planted, Bumpy lay in bed reading. Mayme was in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet. And in that quiet, Bumpy looked up at the ceiling the way you look at something that's been bothering you without knowing why. The light fixture above the bed had been moved. Not much, maybe a 1/4 inch. The screw on the left side of the fixture plate was slightly more recessed than the screw on the right. The plaster around the base had a hairline crack that hadn't been there before. Most people wouldn't notice. Bumpy wasn't most people. He got out of bed, stood on a chair, examined the fixture, saw the pinhole in the plaster, barely visible disguised with a dab of white filler that didn't quite match the surrounding surface. He leaned close, heard nothing, but he didn't need to hear anything. He knew what a surveillance microphone looked like. He'd been warned about them by associates who'd found similar devices in their own homes. Bumpy climbed down from the chair, sat on the edge of the bed, and thought. His first instinct was rage. They'd been in his home, in his bedroom. They'd listened to Mayme praying. They'd recorded the private sounds of his marriage. The violation wasn't legal, it was intimate. They hadn't just surveilled him, they'd crawled into the most personal space he had and set up camp. His second instinct was calculation, and that's the instinct was calculation. And that's the instinct that won. If he removed the device, the FBI would know he'd found it. They'd plant another one, somewhere he might not find. They'd increase other surveillance measures. He'd lose the one advantage he now had, knowing exactly where they were listening. But if he left the device in place, something interesting happened. The FBI would continue to trust everything they heard through that microphone. They believed they were listening to Bumpy's unguarded conversations. They believed the intelligence was authentic, which meant that anything Bumpy said in that bedroom, the FBI would treat as verified information. The microphone wasn't a liability. It was a direct line to the FBI's decision-making apparatus, a weapon disguised as a vulnerability. Bumpy picked up the phone and called Illinois Gordon. Not from the bedroom, from a payphone on the corner. "I need you to come over tomorrow. Come to the bedroom. I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to react exactly the way I tell you to react. We're putting ONA show." The setup took 2 weeks. Bumpy didn't rush. He understood that the FBI's analysts were pattern-oriented. They would be suspicious of a sudden, dramatic piece of intelligence. It needed to arrive naturally, embedded in the rhythm of normal conversation. It needed to feel overheard, not delivered. So Bumpy spent those 2 weeks feeding the microphone a carefully escalating series of conversations. Small talk that gradually shifted toward business. Business that gradually shifted toward a specific topic. A major heroin shipment coming through a new Italian connection. Someone outside the usual Genovese channels. He dropped hints. A location there. Never too much at once. Always as if he were talking to Illinois or Mayme about something he assumed was private. The agents in their headphones at 26 Federal Plaza were taking notes, filling reports, connecting dots that Bumpy was drawing for them. By the 3rd week of April, Bumpy was ready for the main performance. Saturday night, April 18, 1964. Bumpy and Illinois sat in the bedroom. Bumpy at his desk, Illinois in the chair by the window. They spoke at normal volume, the way two men discuss business they believe nobody can hear. Bumpy opened a folder, looked at a piece of paper, shook his head. "You're not going to believe this. You know Marchetti." Illinois knew his line. "The state senator?" Bumpy nodded. "Alt. O. Marchetti. His office on 82nd Street. He's been running product through his townhouse basement for the Bonanos. Not street level, high level. 30 kilos last month. They're using his diplomatic contacts for the imports. Corsican supply straight from Marseilles. The French connection pipeline, but routed through Marchetti's people instead of the usual channels. The measured disbelief, the careful questions, the reluctant acceptance that a sitting state senator might be involved in narcotics trafficking. "What's the timeline?" Illinois asked. "It arrives at his townhouse between 5 and 6 a.m. He's got a basement entrance on the alley side. Marchetti's driver meets the delivery. The product goes into a reinforced closet behind the furnace. Then it gets broken down and distributed through 3 restaurants in Little Italy that the Bonanos control." "That's detailed," Illinois said, because it was supposed to sound detailed. Bumpy had spent days constructing a story that had the texture of real intelligence. Specific dates, specific times, specific locations, specific weights. "I've had a man watching Marchetti's place for 6 weeks, Bumpy said. "Every delivery, every car, every face." He paused. "We could use this. If Marchetti goes down, the Bonanos lose their government protection. That opens up space for us." Illinois leaned forward. "Or we let the feds find out. Let them do the work." Bumpy shook his head. "I'm not giving anything to the feds. I'm not a snitch, but," he smiled, "if someone happened to mention something in the right place, and it happened to reach certain ears, that's not snitching. That's just conversation." The microphone above their heads captured every word. By Monday morning, it was transcribed, analyzed, and sitting on the desk of the supervising agent assigned to the Johnson surveillance operation. The FBI's internal process moved exactly as Bumpy had predicted. The intelligence was too specific to ignore. A sitting New York state senator running heroin through his townhouse for the Bonanno crime family. Dates, times, quantities, delivery methods. If true, it was the biggest case the Bureau's New York office had seen in years. A prosecution that would connect organized crime to state government. Exactly the kind of case that Morgenthau had been building his career toward. That was the fatal flaw. The Bureau's surveillance teams had grown to trust the Edgecombe Avenue microphone implicitly. 3 weeks of consistent, accurate intelligence had conditioned them to believe that what they heard through that device was genuine. They'd heard Bumpy discuss real operations, real names, real dollar amounts, because Bumpy had made sure the early conversations were truthful. He'd fed them real intelligence, his own operations, as bait, a sacrifice play. Give up small truths to make the big lie irresistible. The FBI cross-referenced Marchetti's name. Aldo Marchetti, 58, New York State Senator, representing a district that included parts of the Bronx and Westchester. Italian-American, connected to Italian-American civic organizations. No criminal record, no prior intelligence linking him to organized crime. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, as the Bureau's training manuals love to say. And the intelligence from the Edgecombe Avenue microphone was too detailed, too specific, too confident to be fabrication. No criminal would invent this kind of story in his own bedroom. That was the reasoning. The logic that Bumpy had anticipated and exploited. If this story has you locked in, subscribe right now, because what happens next is the part the FBI tried to bury for 30 years. Sunday, May 3rd, 1964, 5:47 a.m., 14 FBI agents assembled outside Senator Aldo Marchetti's 4-story townhouse on East 82nd Street. 2 unmarked cars, 3 surveillance vans, a battering ram, federal warrants signed by a judge who'd been woken at 4 a.m. and presented with a case file built almost entirely on intelligence from a microphone planted illegally in Bumpy Johnson's bedroom. The lead agent, a 15-year veteran named Frank Calloway, gave the signal at 5:52 a.m. The front door came in on the first strike. Agents flooded the foyer. Flash identification, FBI federal warrant. Nobody move. Senator Aldo Marchetti was in his kitchen, wearing a bathrobe, making pancakes for his 2 children. His wife, Donna, was setting the table. His 11-year-old daughter screamed. His 8-year-old son dropped a glass of orange juice that shattered on the tile floor. Agents swept every room. The basement, the closet behind the furnace, the alley entrance. Every inch of the townhouse. They found nothing. No heroin, no narcotics of any kind, no reinforced closet, no evidence of any illegal activity whatsoever. They found a senator's home. Books, family photographs, children's toys, a dog named Rocco who barked at everyone, and a basement full of Christmas decorations and old tax records. Calloway called 26 Federal Plaza at 6:14 a.m. negative. No contraband, no evidence. Residence is clean. E-line went silent. Senator. Marchetti stood in his kitchen, pancake batter still on his hand, his daughter crying behind him. Would someone like to explain to me why 14 armed men just broke down my front door while my children were eating breakfast? The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. What nobody at the FBI had considered was that Bumpy Johnson understood something about New York in 1964 that the Bureau didn't. A raid on a private citizen's home could be managed. A raid on an Italian-American state senator's home was a political earthquake. Marchetti wasn't just any politician. He chaired the state Senate's Judiciary Committee. He had relationships with the governor's office, with the mayor's office, with the Italian-American Civil Rights League. He had a lawyer on retainer who'd been waiting his entire career for a case exactly like this. By noon on May 3rd, Marchetti's attorney had filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice. By that evening, the senator held a press conference on the steps of his townhouse, the broken front door visible behind him. His children stood at his side. This morning, armed federal agents broke into my home while my family ate breakfast. They terrorized my children. They pointed weapons at my wife. They destroyed my front door, and they found nothing, because there was nothing to find. He paused. I am an elected official. I have served this state for 12 years. I have no criminal record. I have no connection to organized crime. And yet, the Federal Bureau of Investigation treated me and my family like criminals in our own home, based on, as far as I can tell, rumor, innuendo, and whatever passed for evidence inside J. Edgar Hoover's paranoid imagination. The newspapers detonated. The Daily News ran it front page. The New York Times covered the press conference. The Amsterdam News ran its own angle. FBI targets Italian senator. Oh, woe's really watching home. Morgenthau's office scrambled. The intelligence had come from a classified surveillance operation. They couldn't reveal the source without admitting they'd illegally bugged a private citizen's bedroom. They couldn't defend the raid without explaining why they'd trusted uncorroborated intelligence from a wiretap that no judge had authorized. They were trapped between the illegality of their surveillance and the embarrassment of their failure. There was no good option. Morgenthau, brilliant as he was, understood immediately that the entire operation had been compromised, not by a leak, not by a mole, by Bumpy Johnson himself, by the man they thought they were listening to, the man who had been speaking directly to them the whole time. Within 2 weeks, the surveillance operation on the Edgecombe Avenue apartment was quietly terminated. The microphone doubled due, as removed during another black bag entry while Mayme was at church. The listening post above the bathroom was vacated. The tapes were classified, filed, and buried. Marchetti filed a civil lawsuit against the FBI that was quietly settled out of court 18 months later for an undisclosed sum. 3 agents were reassigned. Calloway, the raid leader, was transferred to a field office in Nebraska. The supervising agent who'd authorized the raid based on the surveillance transcripts took early retirement. The beauty of what Bumpy did was in what he didn't do. He didn't brag, didn't leak, didn't tell a single person outside his inner circle what had happened. There was no press conference, no anonymous tip to a friendly reporter, no whispered boasts at the back of a Lenox Avenue restaurant, because Bumpy understood that the moment he took credit, the story changed. It would become about him, about a criminal outsmarting law enforcement, and the FBI would have motivation to come after him harder than ever. Instead, he let the story belong to Marchetti. Let it be about an innocent senator whose rights were violated. Let it be about FBI overreach, about Hoover's paranoia, about the erosion of civil liberties. Those were stories that damaged the Bureau in ways that a gangster's boast never could. Bumpy had used the FBI's own microphone to weaponize the Bureau against itself. He'd identified their weakness, an over-reliance on uncorroborated surveillance intelligence. He'd exploited their ambition, Morgenthau's desperate desire to connect the Italian mob to government corruption. And he'd predicted their process, the institutional momentum that would carry a piece of exciting intelligence from a transcript to a warrant to a battering ram, without anyone stopping to ask the simplest question: what if it's not true? Mayme Johnson never learned about the microphone. Bumpy made sure of the T. He had it removed himself, months later, after the FBI had already taken their own device out. He patched the pinhole in the plaster, repainted the ceiling, and replaced the light fixture. Mayme noticed the new fixture one evening. "Did you change the light?" she asked. "Old one was flickering," Bumpy said. "Got you a nicer one? Brighter." Mayme smiled. "Thank you, Ellsworth." That was it. That was the entire conversation about the most sophisticated counterintelligence operation Harlem had ever produced. A new light fixture, a brighter bulb, and a wife who never knew that for 3 weeks. The FBI had listened to her. There's a lesson in this story that goes beyond Bumpy Johnson and the FBI. Power isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about information. About knowing what your enemy doesn't know, you know. About sitting in a room with a microphone above your head and understanding that the people on the other end of that microphone are not just listening, they're believing. And belief, when it's based on bad intelligence, is the most destructive force in the world. Bumpy Johnson read more books in Alcatraz than most professors read in a career. He studied chess, philosophy, military strategy, poetry. He understood Sun Tzu's central principle: all warfare is deception. He understood that the greatest victories come not from overpowering your enemy, but from making your enemy overpower themselves. On a Sunday morning in May 1964, 14 FBI agents broke down a senator's door because a man in Harlem had a conversation with his lieutenant in a bugged bedroom. They heard exactly what they wanted to hear. They moved exactly the way they were expected to move, and they destroyed their own credibility with their own battering ram. Bumpy Johnson didn't fire a shot, didn't make a threat, didn't break a law. He just talked, in his own bedroom, at normal volume, about a lie so carefully constructed that the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world swallowed it whole. That's not a gangster story. That's a masterclass. And the teacher was a man from Charleston, South Carolina, with a bump on the back of his head. and a mind that the FBI never once understood. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. We're telling the Bumpy Johnson stories the government buried. Drop a comment below. When they're listening to everything, who really has the power? The man with the microphone, or the man who knows it's there? Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the FBI recorded Mayme Johnson's prayers, and her husband made them pay for it without ever raising his voice. Harlem remembers. The FBI would rather you didn't.